I'm not going to start until 7 o'clock, but I figured I would get in here to make sure everything's working. There is sound. I'm just a little awkward. I wasn't speaking. Um, I was putting up the slideshow, but then I realized I cannot see the chat when I'm doing that, so I will wait to put that up until it is 7. Kind of crazy to see 50 people in here. I am in a like semi-public area. I'm in a room on my college campus because I cannot do this at home. So if there is any background noise, I apologize for that. If it is causing you to not be able to hear what I am saying, um, feel free to like ask me for clarification if there's anything you missed. Yeah, there's no one in here right now. There's been a couple bursts of like noise and then dead silence. I've been here since the plant can panel, and it has, I think, probably the best area for me to do this in. Um, it is 6:58. When I am presenting, I will. My bookmark folder organization is fascinating. I sometimes forget what is where, but that's okay. I'm learning it. I'm working on it. I care more about the aesthetics of the tarot cards than ease of use, to be quite honest. Um, so when I'm presenting, I'm just gonna be looking at my slides. Yes, yes, it is. And the Wheel of Fortune is where I have all of my school resources because it's the Wheel of Fortune. I am in school for some months out of the year, but some I am not. So that's where my school resources go. Um, the Fool is, since it's the first card, the Fool is like sites that I, in theory, would check the most often, but that's not really the case. Mm. The Devil is all my Google stuff because I have to use Google, unfortunately. The Tower is my coding stuff because coding feels like the Tower. Hey, it is 7 o'clock. So I am going to go ahead and start. Okay, so this is my panel on fiction lifestyling. I am going to be looking at my slideshow as I'm doing this. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the panel chat, preferably not the like in the panel questions chat, preferably not the like panel chat most of you are talking in now because we'll probably not see it there. Um, and like I said, if there's any background noise and you can't hear what I'm saying, feel free to ask in there for me to clarify something. I like many of these panels. I am going to talk at you for maybe 25 minutes, give or take. That's about how long my practices have been running. And then the rest will be for Q&A and just talking about this. I have a link to my slideshow and a link to all of the resources I mentioned um, that I will be putting in panel questions after I'm done. I do not have a script to share because I'm not using a script. So, wish me luck with that. So, about me, I am Willa Rosenberg of the collective unconscious, which is my soul bonding system. I use a lot of pronouns. I like it if this is too many to remember, that is totally fine. Just pick a few. I use they, them, she, her, its, a, air, am, soul, souls, vamp, vamps, and fey, fair. And fiction folk, transspecies, and archetroper, and a soul bonder. I am one of the admins, along with voxels, of the independent Otherkin Wiki, and my personal site, if you are interested, is Petrachoran, Petrachor, and then an dot WTF. Um, my soul bonds and I are collectively queer, disabled, are autistic, and have ADHD. We are all fictional. We are from a variety of different sources. The ones we have multiple people from are Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the 1996 soap opera Dark Shadows. I'm from Buffy. I have this image that my fiance made it for me as a present, depicting what I look like. Being a fiction folk is the most integral identity for all of us. It's the best description of who we are to say that we're from a fictional world, both in a conceptual way of we are from fiction, we are now in a different world. How do we handle that? But also just our fictional lives are so important to us. And we're fiction folk in kind of different ways. I am a reincarnated fictional character. My soul bonds have more of a walk-in situation. Um, but overall, it's what really unites us and how we go about our lives. So you might be wondering what fiction folk is. It's become a pretty popular term, but just to make sure I don't leave anyone in the dark, fiction folk is an umbrella term for all fictional identities. This can be people like fictionkin and fictives, who I am so sorry for that, if you can hear that. This is an umbrella term for all fictional identities, including fictionkin and fictives and other people who are fictional characters, or people who are have sympaths or soul bonders who have a relationship to fiction. It was coined independently a few times in different communities. My first introduction to it was in the Alt plus H Discord server. Mordecai Midas wrote an essay about all of the terms that were coined there that I've linked. Um, it resonated with me as a primary label instead of fictionkin for a few reasons. Um, Partially because I just don't like some of the fictionkin common terminology. It's totally fine to use. It doesn't feel representative of me. But another part of it is, which not that this is incompatible with being fictionkin, but to show a little bit of my distance from the label, is that I'm not just a character. I live as one. Um, like how you could be otherkin and be non-human, and that be the entirety of who you are, but not do so many things to live your life that way. Or you could be transspecies, and excuse me, and be non-human, but also make intentional choices to live your life as non-human. You could be both other transspecies, just like you could be both fictionkin and what I'm calling a fiction lifestyler. but they are a little bit different in some ways, at least the way I'm seeing them through this lens. So what's fiction lifestyling then? Um, it was also I also first heard it in Alma stage, coming from the term furry lifestyler, with furry lifestylers being furries who live as their persona. Their persona is literally them. They might feel more genuine themselves in a fursuit, and their persona's name might be their name. In that way, fiction lifestyling, how I first saw it, was used to describe people who legally change their names to their fictotypes and align their fashion sense and things like careers and hobbies with them. It's that living as a fictional character like I experience, and it in my experience, it kind of feels a little bit like a transition in some ways. Um, it's just not a new experience, and I'm trying to coin a term here. I'm more of adopting language I have seen used for purposes that fit me best. Um, and the reason why I say it's not a new experience is because I do see some fiction can doing things like this. I've also seen evidence of some people before any of the ultrahuman communities were ever really a thing, changing their names to fictional characters and doing other things. And that doesn't to be fiction lifestyling. Plenty of people who aren't ultrahuman change their names to those of fictional characters, but sometimes in the context of I am doing this because I am such a fan of this work, it just feels a little ultra normal to me. And I wonder if some other people before even the original fiction kin and otaku kin communities kind of had this idea. Something I like about the term fiction lifestyling is that it's inclusive of all fiction folk. Like I said earlier, if you're fiction kin, you can fiction lifestyle. You don't have to be fiction kin to be a fiction lifestyler. Um, it can apply to fictives, to people with syntax. Um, I would even say it can apply to people who aren't fiction folk other than being a fiction lifestyler. I would argue that being a fiction lifestyler would make you fiction folk. But if you are not inherently a fictional character, or even voluntarily a fictional character, but feel genuinely represented by fiction lifestyling, I think that's a super cool experience. Um, and for this image here, I just wanted to show a little bit behind the scenes of my own, like a building of my fiction lifestyling. I just written my name, and I wasn't intending it for it to be like a super fancy signature or anything. But the way the G came out just really made me feel good, and it's something that I want to adopt in my signature when I put in the time to make one with my true name. What does that look like? You describe changing your life and making choices that align with your true self, but what does that look more practically? How does that look more practically, I guess is the way to phrase that. So for us, this is me and my soul bonds all kind of participate in this. We change our hair and clothes and physical things like I have been dyeing my hair to be red ever since having the confidence to. And it has always made me feel good to wear clothes and kind of style myself how I would have in my past life. Um, and my soul bonds, when they friend or just around, like to wear clothes that they would have worn. We also do our nails a lot. My insistent girlfriend would always have her nails done and would also always do mine back in our source. So we do that a lot. We just paint our own nails, do things like that to continue that and express that part of ourselves. We're also learning how to use makeup um, to kind of help with this, both in just the style of makeup that you use, but also kind of subtly changing the way your face looks structurally. And we also want to experiment with scents and perfumes and also doing intentionally changing our voice and adapting it to who we are to further this. So this is definitely a work in progress for us. Art, it can also be in hobbies. I have learned to code as fiction lifestyling. I partially out of a I did this, I want to do it again, but also like if I liked this once, I probably like it again. We also make art and take care of plants with fiction lifestyling reasoning. And we are all from the past or from other worlds. So like to consume media from our time periods that would have been available to us. And it makes us feel like ourselves. We take a water break really quick. All should do that too. We also used to like older technology. I am an old computer person. I worked with old computers. Well, then modern computers, but now old in my source. Um, represent that, but we like to use it to represent that kind of time issue. We use our iPod and DVDs and CDs a lot. We also like to just try to remember to put down our phone because for a lot of us, it doesn't feel natural to have our phone on us all the time because we wouldn't have had that as our slash past or whatever selves. Um, Also bigger lifestyle changes like architropy, which I'm going to expand on. And for some of us, witchcraft can be very affirming. Witchcraft doesn't work the exact same here as it did in our worlds, but it still feels good to connect with it. And also, both of my Dark Shadow Soulbonds are from France, and I knew I wasn't fluent in Latin, but I knew an amount of Latin for magic. So relearning languages that we used to know was also very empowering. Yeah. I mentioned archetypy just now. Archetypy is the experience of living as an archetype or trope or something similar to that. There's a big focus on narratives and a lot of archetypy, also on the role you play in your life. It is, I think, very compatible with fiction lifestyling. My main archetype is the magician from tarot, which is part of why I have my bookmarks separated into tarot folders. Um, and to me, being the magician is about connecting the metaphysical world with the physical world. And I do that through soul bonding, through connecting with entities from other worlds and bringing them here. I do that through magic. I also do that through more mundane things like writing. Um, and it feels representative of how I used magic in my source. And also think I liked writing back then too. So it's a way for me to kind of be intentional about those traits in myself. You can embody roles that you played in your source and adapt your life now to kind of form it into a similar narrative. And I think that's pretty cool. Archetypy can be part of fiction lifestyling. Fiction lifestyling can be archetypy. They can just be separate identities that work well together. Um, and I've linked here the past pen by Veet on archetypy, which I think is a great resource if you want to learn more. And also TV tropes, because on TV tropes, you can look up specific media, you can look up specific characters. I think that's really helpful if you want to get an idea of what trolls you played out or what roles your quote unquote target character, if you're not a character yourself, would have played out. Also, I think it's very compatible with Ontopunk. Ontopunk is a punk subculture centered around altered humanity. It's about being proud of who we are and supporting those who are marginalized. There's a big focus on DIY and gear and body mods. And for me, my fiction lifestyling is autopunk. Um, when I am like physically presenting as a fictional character, I'm doing so through gear. I may eventually do so through body mods. Um, because I am also just punk in general and artsy in general, I do a lot of this through DIY. I like that if there's a specific thing out in my source, whether it be a necklace or like another object I had, I can do my best to recreate that and make it and forge my way here into being who I was. I think that is just really cool. Um, and like with architropy, being ontopunk can be fiction lifestyle or the other way around, or they can be separate, but their identities that just work really well together. And I was introduced to ontopunk mostly via the DIY panel by the Sidewalk Talk system from a past other con, which I've linked here, which is a great resource for starting out. It was very encouraging. Mm, Excuse me again. So if anyone is interested in that, I would definitely say don't do it. I have here an example of me sewing patches onto things. I make patches constantly. I sew patches onto things constantly. Um, this is not the most fiction lifestyling piece I have made, for a lack of a better phrasing, but I wanted to point out my sword lesbian patch because of it being a tarot card, and I'm also lesbian. I found that really affirming and neat. And here are just some images of fiction lifestyling for me. The first two are selfies, obviously, of me feeling like myself. And the first one, I think that was after I had dyed my hair for the first time and really vibed with it. And it made me feel like myself. And the second one was after I had gotten that hat, which really felt like something that I would have worn. And I wear that hat all the time. I have some similar hats. I'm wearing a similar one right now. Um, so just as an example of how I use my fashion sense to communicate who I am. I also have pictures of my mapped out battle jacket. Um, Not all the way done with it yet, so that's why I use these in progress photos, but I am much closer than working on it during this con, where I have a lot of patches dedicated to who I am. Some are general Alter UN patches. I have some with like representing my species identities. I have a DIY or die patch inspired by that panel. But I also have some quotes and from my source and the Clutter Ring, the vampire book, which I enjoy. And I also just I think my favorite is the fictional character patch, just at the top there. I like that I put that part of myself so bluntly out there. So this is time for the Q&A and also brainstorming. If I mention anything you're curious about, I'd like to hear. If this resonates with you and there's something you'd like to accomplish with fiction lifestyling, let's talk about it. Because sometimes it does take an amount of creativity to figure out how am I going to do this, especially if your fictional self isn't quite from a world like this Earth, or just because it can be hard. So I want to open this up to that. Let me unshare my screen. Okay. Um, Sorry I did not see that about getting a link to the slides. But I will post one at the end. I can do that now actually. The first is to my slideshow, and then after that, everything is what I anything I linked within the slideshow separately. Getting I don't like embeds, but I gotta deal with that, I guess. Yeah. Do I think fiction lifestyling takes anything away from the life I have now? No, I don't. And I think if you went about it in a not necessarily bad, but maybe not the most healthy way it could. The way I see it is that this is a choice that I make that feels so good to empower myself, but time has passed. I am a little bit different now. But even if I hadn't reincarnated, I would be a little bit different now because everyone changes as new experiences happen. So if if I'm a little different than I was in the past, I let myself own that. And I don't see that as different from or against my fiction lifestyling. I see it as two that both are very important both are very important to who I am. And I really appreciate that question because I was going to mention how you can still be your own person, different from how you were. You can still change. I was going to mention that in my slides and I forgot. So thank you. Mel asks, are there ways you can think of to embody being fictional in general without having a specific character or world or piece of media? I think that is definitely possible. It might help to have kind of like a genre in mind, and then you could look at things within like tropes or aspects of that genre, or even if it's not a genre, just kind of what being fictional means to you, I guess. I don't know if that's very helpful, but if you have any more specific questions, I can try to answer them as well. Litter Pigeon asks, how do you go about being more openly fiction kin slash having confidence to do that? There are some situations where I probably couldn't be open, but also some where it'd probably be fine. I am just too scared to bring it up. I am the exact same way. Um, I am sitting here talking about how I am making these choices, and I am, but also most people in my life um, don't know me as Willow. So I am working alongside that right with you. What has helped me is making these choices, starting with things that you don't have to be open about yourself. Like, I can dye my hair, and people aren't going to be like, oh, that's because you're a fictional character. So just starting out with things that people would consider normal, even if they're are ultra human, um, has been huge in helping me become more confident in myself. So that would be my main advice. Xavier asks, how would you go about fiction lifestyling as someone who is polykin? I have several fictor types, and I really want to incorporate a lot of it into my life, but there's so much that I'm not really sure what to do, really. I am only one character, but as I said, I have soul bonds who are other people. And so we kind of trade out sometimes, like if someone else is playing the front that day, or if they're not playing the front, but just be around. They might wear their outfit. We might do things that they enjoy doing. Um, so maybe you could apply something to like that to your life. Like if you experience shifts, or if you just want to kind of choose who you're going to embody one day, that might be a good way to go about it. Um, you could also see if there's any way they overlap. Maybe um, like painting my nails overlaps for me and Tara. Yeah, that's my first thoughts about that. Fred asks, I've lost most of my science slash math brain, and I feel like it's a bit late to get them back in this life. What do you think? I don't think it's too late. Um, like, I just noticed 100 people in the audience. Like I said, I have people in my system who were native French speakers at one point, came to this body, know none of it anymore, and their goal, well, at least one of their goals, probably both of their goals, is to become completely fluent again. And I think the way to go about it is you can have goals for getting it all back. Um, you may not meet those goals, but making any progress is a big connection back to yourself if that's something that you want to do. And I mentioned earlier in this panel chat that I was a Pokemon trainer and now I'm getting into competitive Pokemon. Do you think that's a good example of this? That is absolutely a brilliant example of that. I kind of wish I had something equivalent like that for us because that's really cool. Cinder asks, do you have suggestions on how to learn their fictional language slash alphabet the best? Um, I assume this is for a fictional language like Elvish that like you can actually learn. I would look for resources for learning that language. Like Pokepona is a conlang, but there are still resources to learn it. If there's not, I think you can study like ways to learn a language with like flashcards or writing 3 sentences a day in your target language. Um, doing things like that, I think you can research strategies for quote unquote real languages and apply your language to that. Sai asks, I'm curious on how one can use witchcraft to be affirming of a fictional identity. Can you elaborate with some examples of different practices you might be able to use? This is a big thing for me because I was a witch in my past life. I also have a few Sobons who are witches. So for us, we're trying to kind of build as equivalent of a practice as we can in this world as what we did in the past. Um, For example, we would use a lot of Latin in my world, so I'm learning Latin to incorporate that into my magic. Angelique did a lot of what would be known here as sympathetic magic, where you use an object to represent someone and then do things to the object to influence real people. So I think finding adjacent practices to what you want to get at um, is a good way to do that. That's kind of what I meant when I mentioned it. Thank you, Spooky. They said I don't think I have any questions, but I'm feeling very inspired now. I really appreciate that. I have also felt very inspired here. Poppy asks any ideas of how to fiction lifestyle when your gender presentation is incompatible with your fictotype's gender. I'm femme, but my fictotype is very mask. We don't have a lot of fashion in common. Everything I do feels like a compromise. It's rough, I get that a bit. Um, you could maybe start with things like I wore this color shirt. Like start with the very kind of basic abstract things. Um, that might help you get to having a more femme version. Like look at things like color, like I mentioned, also maybe fabric types, cuts of clothes, anything that you feel like you could harvest and take all of that and go from there. Lav says, if I live in a parallel life with my soul bonds in bond space, is there ways you suggest bringing that life into this reality in a way that's affirming so I feel more part of that life, such living in a fictional world? Like I know in Larimore they have certain types of magic, mutual aid communities, Fae, Rangers, and Winry Place is also a unique place where our soul bond experiences intermingle and come to life just as much as they do as people. You mentioned mutual aid. Like that's a pretty concrete thing. So if there are other concrete things like that, um, those would be things I think to focus on bringing into this life. Also, if it's through your if it's something that just can't physically be done, trying to change your perspectives and phrasing about things is a possibility, I think. Um, I'm not really sure other than that, but if you have something more specific, I might get more ideas. X asks, I'm part of a system, and many times I try to bring elements from the memories of my previous life into our current shared life, but there are elements which I'll never be able to bring, simply because they would harm our well-being or dangerous or illegal, etc. What should be done in those situations? How can I put elements into our lifestyle from a previous life that shouldn't be replaced? Um, I think changing perspectives, like I mentioned, not necessarily changing perspectives, but adopting perspectives, like I mentioned with Lab, might be a good way to do that if those perspectives are healthy, of course. Um, you could also think about how would um, you from your past life, if those dangerous things were not a part of their life, what would their life be like? What would an ideal life for them be like where things are potentially better? Mm, and to go into that. This is also very silly, but my brain, as I was reading that question, thought of like kids using candy cigarettes to pretend to smoke. So I don't know if there's an equivalent for that for you, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Voxels asks any advice for lifestyling when one's source has many concepts and even laws of physics that don't apply in this universe. Um, I think, like I've said before, about like trying to have similar perspectives might help you. Um, and also maybe there's ways to adapt things to these laws of physics. What would those things from your source look like if they were in this world? Mel asked to be more specific, wondering if it's possible to be a lifestyle soul bonder who feels half fictional myself. I don't see why not. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but that is definitely an awesome idea. Um, Rob had mentioned pop culture paganism and witchcraft. That is something that I've also looked into that has helped me. That's kind of what I was getting at. Otaku asked, "What's the longest it ever took you to find a piece of gear?" Um, Honestly, I would say there's a search that's still ongoing. I There's a lot of my source being from the 90s has a lot of things that were made that I cannot find now. Um, I know there was a sweater that I wore that like was commercially made, but I cannot find it. So I would say it's ongoing, and I would like to either find that or make my own of that, or possibly do both. For Luca, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Apologies if not. How would you consider going about your character about um um, how to change your name to like a less traditionally human one. Um, that's cool. I think even if your name is not your like fictional self's name, um, if it matches the same vibes, if it's a name that your fictional self would feel represented by, um, that's a valid fictional lifestyling to me. Thank you, Knuckles, for forwarding those questions. Sage, aka Knuckles, so you can um I'm I'm a member of Jay's system and a majority as a fiction folk, many from different sources. Um a lot of us live our internal lives like we would live our lives in source in one big melting pot that is the head world. Arises, we have to use the body. We don't know how to fit fiction lifestyling for so many of us into a life that is mainly surrounding the host's life. We want to make gear or pick up hobbies from our sources, but we frequently don't have the means to get affirmations for our life when we front, especially visually with the body. What would you suggest for someone who switches in and out a lot? So I wear outfits for myself, but I'm worried someone else will switch in, and it made me have to change their accessories so often. Um, I would try to find like a middle ground, like things that are affirming to a number of you, which may or may not be possible. Um, you could also experiment with things that like switch out fairly easily, like a hat or a vest that is double-sided that you can just take off and turn inside out. Um, I thought of that, so I think finding a middle ground and also things that can change pretty quickly, would be good for you. Vex asked, "How do you meet a balance between fiction lifestyling and still being authentic to you as you are now?" Um, I'm worried about getting into a cycle of accidentally suppressing things that aren't accurate to my fictional identity, but that I still enjoy. Mhm. If it's an issue for you, something that might be helpful is to like set aside a time of this is my time that I am going to explore my fiction lifestyling interests and see if anything vibes with me. And then also a different time where you're like, I'm going to try to find new interests that weren't in my source. Um, and And also just keep in mind if you don't like something, you don't have to continue doing it. Like it's normal to lose and gain new interests um with time. So it's definitely don't force yourself to be interested in something that you're just not interested in that you were in canon. Um I think the perspective of trying things out um would be helpful. Like not forcing yourself to go with it. But like with me, I was like, hey, I liked coding once. I'm gonna try it again, see if this is something I still enjoy. Astral said, not any specific questions, but I found this panel incredibly interesting to feel more like you beyond maybe finding pieces of clothing that feels kind of like you if you squint, which has been kind of our only goal or idea is to feel more comfortable as yourselves. I'm glad it helps. Um, I love the bend gender bend idea. That is neat. I think that was kind of what I was a similar adjacent thing to what I was getting at. Bite asked, I don't know if it's a simple topic to discuss, but how would you recommend lifestyling your social life when you are plural or have multiple fictional identities? Because it's kind of hard to be consistent when you're constantly changing, like seeking out certain character tropes IRL, I guess. Yeah, you could. If I think by seeking out different character tropes was like a suggestion of what you could do, then yeah, I think that totally works. Um, I think just like trying to embrace all of them equally would be an option. And like I know that's way easier said than done. But I feel like a lot of people aren't going to notice if especially if they don't know that you're plural or fictional. Um they're they're probably not going to notice as much as you think. So just doing what you feel like in that moment, I think is a valid response. And also if people do know that you're plural or fiction folk, you can communicate that to them. Um and just because fiction lifestyling is consistent for me doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. So you might find some ways to emphasize your fluidity. Virgil says, I kind of feel weird about fiction lifestyling. On one hand, I like the ideal of it. On the other hand, I already find it difficult to accept that I'm even real due to my fictionalness. And I've been trying to separate myself somewhat from my source in an attempt to remedy this. I kind of just want to be a guy. So I don't know if it's the right choice for me to be a fiction lifestyler, even though the concept appeals to me. That's valid. Just because you can like something as a concept doesn't mean it's right for you. Um, and also, if you decide you want to try fiction lifestyling, if it's not working, you don't have to do it. Sam asks any advice on lifestyling when you're paranoid about being recognized. This was me for so long. Mhm. You can pass it off like you're a fan of something that works. Um, I get kind of paranoid about like people in my family realizing that I even like my source because like what if they notice the parallels? But like in reality, people who won't even most people don't know what fiction folk even is. They're not going to notice it. If they recognize you, they're going to think you're a fan, probably, which might be a difficult conversation to navigate, but I do think it's helpful to know that just because they recognize you doesn't mean like they know your entire life story. Um, Pookie says, like I've sort of just coming vaguely read some of the questions. My interpretation is not every single fiction folk is necessarily a fictional character. Yes, there are fictional species in heart homes. Um, sometimes perhaps fiction lifestyling could be more about theming yourself in a way that is affirming than being one fictional character you try to match one to one. I love that interpretation. Um, that might be a good way to go about it for a lot of these people who can't or have different ideas about fiction lifestyling, who can't exactly do it in the way that I've been talking about because of like even just limits to the laws of physics, like Voxel's mentioned. Um, yeah, I like that. Otaku says my fictor types represent different parts of my life as well as different parts of my being. Would you say this is true for you as well? I wouldn't say so, but that's also because I am one fictional character. I do not have multiple fictional identities. That's probably part of why. Um, I do definitely my soul bonds, I bond with them because I have a connection to them, and sometimes it is because I see myself in them a little bit. So if that's relevant. So I love flipping in your profile picture. I said that during the last panel, but I don't know if you saw. Okay, I think I got to the bottom finally. Um, ideas for lifestyling via clothing and accessories when your type is, for a definitely random example. A mostly naked furry. Huh, that is fun. Um, hmm, well, I assume by mostly naked furry, you mean an animal with fur, not like a naked mole rat. Um, so like dressing in the colors of your persona, maybe. Um, as an idea. Also just things um like accessories that you feel like just fit their vibes might work. If you can't go with physically how they would look like, I would suggest to go with vibes. Um, Sam asks, do you have any advice for DIYing non-human traits like tails or wings? Um, I would say just to like look up what cosplayers have done before and see if there's anything that you find cool. Um, I have found some tutorials for like making tails and wings that move before. After this panel, I can try to track those down if anyone is interested in that, which I assume people would be. Um, Vic says, I know a lot of furries who wear keychains with their personas on their belt or something. That may be an option. Yes, I agree with that. That is a good idea. Yes, otaku, source material merch definitely helps. Even if you don't want to like actually buy it, like it could definitely be like a inspiration for what you want to do. Um, you could look for like cosplays people have done or merch people have made if you don't have official merch. Sam said in particular, I'm thinking about things that might be more subtle that would get euphoria, but not many people could understand as a trait, if that makes sense. Is that in reference to the DIYing non-human um, non-human traits? Um, if it is, you could do like embroidery. Um, I've seen, I think it was in the DIY or die panel, people made wings out of safety pins on the back of their battle jacket. Um, be like for a tail, something on your belt, even if it's not like where the tail would go. But I'm at the bottom, I'm kind of hopping between the panel questions and panel one chat, but it looks like people are talking about VRJet. Scrolling up a little bit, Vanitas, they're probably not going to notice as much as you think. Yes, that is true. And I need to know that as well. I need to hear that as well. Just because I am presenting this panel does not mean that I am the expert or the best at this, especially when it comes to confidence, honestly. But me doing this and me presenting this panel is part of building that confidence so that I can continue to do more with this. Um, Feathers mentioned foods in the panel one chat. Yes, I foods are great. I don't have much of a connection with foods with my fiction lifestyling, but definitely in a trans species way, I do. Louis said this panel was very assuring and honestly very inspiring. Thank you. Wildcard in panel questions asked, "How do you cope with being dead in Source?" Um, I have a soul bond who is dead in Source, maybe more than one, honestly. That I'm just not thinking of. But for her, we don't have as much perspective on the distress that brings. Um, but for her, she just really tries to appreciate on focusing, like the focusing on appreciating that she is here in this life. She's still alive. She gets to continue to live, and seeing that as a positive thing, focusing on being grateful is something that helps her a lot. Which is not to say that you shouldn't feel things about it or that you can't feel negatively about it, but try not to fall into that despair, I would say. Um, I would definitely, yeah, it's a rough situation, but you're here now. And even though it's definitely hard, that means that you have the opportunity to do things that make you happy and make other people happy. And you can live the life that you want to live. Queen Sictona said, "I see this life as my afterlife." That's also a great option. Looking at the panel one chat. Sage says that their hair is already red naturally. Very jealous. Um, they say they're also just not into the color red. If you want me to take it from you, I will. I will steal everyone's red hair. They said they don't. They like their hair being red. I just don't want to wear red clothes. Fair. Looks like I've gotten through most of the questions. Does anyone else have anything? Put it in panel questions. Or hopping between both. So if you put it in panel one, that's fine. Otaku asks, did your Victor type help you process trauma? Yes. Yes. Majorly. I don't know if that was to me, but yes. Finding Buffy was like it became such a rock for me, and then discovering my fictional identity definitely has very hard parts to it, but it has been one of the best things to happen to me. Um, Not favorite foods you connect with, not necessarily for my fictional identity, but a lot of a lot of meats connect me to being a cat and being a dragon because I am trans species and both of those things. Also seeds and nuts. I am a crow as well. Um, Dara says, I literally just got here that I'm curious to see if anyone else has experienced issues with language and how to handle that. We have a headmate whose language doesn't exist in this world, and there's no words in English for concepts that are important to him, and there's a similar situation with me. Oh, I get that. Yeah. We have people who have a similar experience, but they, um, their language does exist in this world, so I don't have that much advice for a language that doesn't exist. But I would say to it doesn't hurt to try to either remember or figure out or come up with those words again. Um, or if you just can't find that same word again or a word that feels the same, maybe just describing those concepts and giving them a new name potentially could be helpful. Robin says, not a question, but making masks is a more accessible thing than some people think. Even if that is symbolic or made out of cardboard or paper mache, it can help. I second that. I made a mask with a base my fiance gave me, but you could just make the base out of cardboard um, just like in a night. And it's not perfect, but I love it. And it is very transpecies vibes. Mhm. It's looks like a couple minutes until my time is up. I see simple typing, so I'll hang out a little bit. Make sure there's no more questions. But one of my soul bonds would kill me if we end up missing the 18 plus panel that's next. The 18 plus panel that's next. So I am not going to push the time too long. And also you can DM me about anything related to this. Um, for OtherCon, I have my DMs opened. Please don't die of soul bond. Yeah, I'm not planning on it. She's the one that would actually kill me if she could and had a reason to. You're welcome, guys. I have really enjoyed this, and it has been really awesome to hear all this good feedback. I'm afraid it's not Kennedy, unfortunately. It's not from Dark Shadow. If Kennedy were here, we both. Here's being punked about fiction, people. Yes, love that. Thank you, Quincy. Quincy, it's my fiance who said amazing panel, 10 out of 10. Yes. Thank you guys for being here and being such an awesome audience. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect. Um, enjoy the con, guys.